I think we need to look into a round 2 Seipps tray. We'll put Tony and Brandon can be the Seipps girls.
That would totally sell. As I shake my head now.
This week we're joined by Laurin Mack of Seipp Brewing. This is episode 113 of the Malting Hour.
What's the haps on the hops? Got yeast, that's bees. This the Malting Hour where we talk about our drink and tell you what we think every other week. And if we get drunk, well, we might slur our speech. Got the gift of gab, the friends you wish you had. Join us for a drink, join us for a laugh. Time is never wasted, where you getting wasted. The Malting Hour here, people take your places. People take your places. People take your home.
Welcome to the Malting Hour. I am one of your hosts, Tony Golick, joined always with
Brandon Whittinger.
Brandon. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. We're recording on a Monday.
Yeah.
We're recording on a night or a day that we normally just post.
Yeah.
Have we ever recorded on a Monday?
Probably,
I don't think so.
I would say years ago, but it was it's not that long ago. But maybe not. I don't know.
We were just discussing how long we've been doing this.
It's a special night.
Ooh, and that voice. Who are we joined with?
Who is that voice?
You tell us.
Laurin Mack.
Sorry, that was trying to segue you into that. Thank you for joining us, Laurin.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. This is a real thrill. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. We've been trying to get this together for how long now?
It's been a little bit, but we're here now.
Started in March-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe end of February.
Yeah.
And it was some back and forth, and we talked about doing this in a tavern, and then this works better.
Yes.
In most situations, because you're not dealing with noise and other things like
Totally. It's a home tavern.
Yeah.
Feel right.
we are at the Malting Hour Studios. As you all know, it is a bar, beer on tap. Still have
Great service here at the Malting Hour.
Big vinyl
tap.
sticker on my wall. It's official.
Absolutely. Well, Laurin, why don't you tell us why you're joining us here in the studios, in the basement in Jefferson Park?
That is a question I'm asking myself.
Don't worry,
I'm kidding.
You're not the first person. Are they going to be comfortable joining us down here? We'll talk about that.
Yes, very comfortable. I am joining you all because I love meeting people who love beer, and I love talking about beer with people who like to talk about beer and history. And it's all made even better when it's in Chicago and talking about Chicago beer history, which is sort of the trifecta, I think, of things that I enjoy talking about. So when I got a message from Brandon, I thought, this sounds fantastic, and let's do it. So here I am.
Awesome. So what, I don't think we've said it yet.
I have not.
Yeah. So what brewery in specifically are we talking about today?
I don't know why I think this is all so funny, but
we're really just leaning into being, as I told you, I'm like, we're just talking. Like, say we just met. That's kind of like how I feel. Like, oh, hey, how's it going? So tell me.
So, gentlemen, I'm coming to you from the Conrad Seipp Brewing Company, which is a brewing company that I restarted after my great grandfather, Conrad Seipp. Yes, 3 greats. Conrad Seipp started it in 1854, which was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
And he was an immigrant from Germany. A lot of people were coming from Germany at that time. Things were really bad in that part of the world in the 1850s. And he came. He was not a brewer. He was his dad was a farmer, and I think he also had some carpentry skills. So he got to Chicago through New York, through Rochester. And he had to figure out how to survive. He picked up a woman that he made his wife, and that sounds funny. He got married, I should say. I think that's the proper terminology.
He physically picked her up.
He found his beloved wife in Rochester. Yeah. There we are, back on track, and moved to Chicago and just tried to figure out, like immigrants do, how to survive and to feed his family. And so he started off driving a beer wagon for the Miller brothers, not the Miller brothers, but some Millers who were brothers. And then he tried his hand at farming, and he ran a hotel, and finally he came into a brewery and decided that that's what he was going to do. He was going to start a brewery in Chicago, which was a good idea because at that time in Chicago, there weren't that many people, and there were a lot of people who were going to be coming to Chicago. Little did he know it was going to really turn into one of the biggest boom towns in America.
Yeah. Right place, right time.
Right place, right time, for sure. That being said, things were pretty rough, especially at the beginning. And I think we sometimes forget about this when you hear about the end game with someone. If you think about it, he comes to America. He probably doesn't speak much English at all. Figures out how to make things happen. He's also coming at a time when his new country goes to civil war against each other. Trying to, I'm sure make sense of all that. And then he starts this brewery, and within a year, the brewery burns down. Because in those days, breweries were always burning down. They were usually made out of wood, and all the tanks were wood, and they were using fire and to heat everything up. So
I heard Chicago had a bad fire.
Chicago had a pretty bad fire,
At one
too.
point, that's not a big deal. We can just
He did
gloss
not
over that.
start that one, I will tell you
But
that.
the brewery did survive that fire.
Well, this is true.
Because they had a brick one by that time.
That was,
Hey, man, don't
That's
jump ahead in the
smart.
story.
that was very, very bad luck for Chicago and pretty good luck for Seipp. But his brewery burnt down in 1855. He also lost a few children then, because I don't know if y'all know, but that was like the cholera outbreak of 1855.
I mean, I'm saying yes, like I know, but things were terrible.
Things were bad.
Yeah.
Things were bad. But what I really love about Conrad is no matter how bad things were, he just kept moving forward. And I think that's something that I really, when I'm feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I just think, what would Conrad do? He would just keep moving forward. And I find that to be very inspirational.
Sure.
So he kept moving forward. He rebuilt the brewery, this time just like the Three Little Pigs out of bricks. So it would not burn down so easily. And he started making beer, and he started making a lot of it. And he got some infusion of capital so he could expand his brewery. And by the time the Chicago fire rolled through,
Not the soccer team. We were talking
not
about
the soccer
actual
team. They were
Chicago.
going to come soon. But the actual fire, he was already one of the biggest brewers in Chicago. And then when the fire literally burnt up half of his competition, I think there were 12 breweries, and it burnt down 6 of them.
Oof.
And his brewery didn't burn down because it was at 27th and Cottage Grove, which is far below the fire line, far to the south. And it was also right on the lake.
Yeah.
So it was just luck, location.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying a lot of breweries burned down, but his didn't.
So you're saying
he also
part of this
said he had
competition.
nothing to do with this? Okay.
We're not starting. No, okay, we're not.
Yes,
starting that
Brandon,
anymore.
that's exactly what I'm saying.
I mean,
Let's
that's pretty.
not start a
That's pretty
rumor
impressive, though, because I think around that time in the 1870s, he was doing like 100,000 barrels a year, and that is
It's insane.
There's breweries now that are in Chicago that are very popular and don't do anywhere near that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He was making a tremendous amount of beer. He made even more as time went on. And I think we sometimes forget that people were just drinking a tremendous amount of beer in those days. If you think about just the workers alone who are rebuilding the city, and that's why we call Seipp's beer the beer that built Chicago. Because as Chicago was being built after the fire, they're just guzzling Seipp's beer because that was safe to drink. It was local and available. And why would you drink Schlitz when you can drink Seipp's, right?
Hey,
I like that. Is that an actual quote? No, I mean I don't dislike Schlitz, but
No, but
Yeah.
you just like Seipp's
absolutely,
better, right, Tony?
absolutely. Hey, cheers! Thanks for bringing all that stuff for us today.
it's funny that you put it like out of all the breweries, like Schlitz is the one that's kind of synonymous with Chicago, just because
Yep.
there's all the tide houses that,
Right.
that were.
They did a great job capitalizing on Chicago's
And I wish,
misfortune.
and I wish there was other breweries that had that like still stood around, But
Yeah.
like for some reason, it's all the Schlitz ones that are still there, and that's a cool piece of history. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I like the story a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of stories with all these breweries, but the Seipp one's pretty.
Yeah, this story in particular is super interesting, and more so that once. Well, we didn't even get to the end of the story. I was going to jump ahead. Sorry. So after the Chicago fire,
There's so much to talk
I know.
about.
I know.
It's exciting.
Well, yeah, I didn't. Well, actually, before we remember this, we left off at the Chicago fire.
Yeah.
And we're going to jump into Brandon. You opened up which beer? I don't remember. Oh, the extra pale Pilsner, right?
That's right. That was a really good one to start drinking.
Yeah,
This was the first beer I tried from Seipp's, and my buddy Phil, who he and I, every now and then, he used to be a very big beer guy, and then stopped being into beer, and He's a very cool dude. And then got into bourbon, and he had like this very big like bourbon collection.
Also delicious.
Absolutely. And his I still need to bring Brandon to his house because we need to do an episode with him. It's obnoxious. Like, and he doesn't drink as much bourbon as he does anymore. And now he just has bottles that he's like collecting. He's like, when he has people over, he's like, have whatever you'd like, pour some. No one's gonna
Sounds
be
like a great friend to have.
Yeah, it's great. Well, so he and I would do bourbon vinyl nights where I'd bring over some records and he has some records. And we would listen to one side of a record and switch to another record and go back and forth, and we were drinking bourbon. And then one time he invited me over and we just hung out in his yard, and he asked me if I ever had this, the Extra Pale Pilsner, because he is a big fan of going to Metropolitan.
Oh, Phil, I love this guy.
Phil's great.
So great.
And he had told me he actually gave me the backstory because he found out about it, because he asked a lot of questions and he found out about it. And he was, like I said, he wasn't very much, he was big into IPAs, then stopped liking IPAs. Like stouts, not so much anymore. Then finding Metropolitan, be like, oh, here's a whole bunch of like German style lagers, and then having this here, a whole nother beer. He was of course interested and brought a 6-pack home, and we were drinking it. And this first time I had it, and then I started noticing it at Benny's and learning a little bit more about it. So that was my first introduction
Through Phil. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Phil.
I will let Phil know that he said this.
And I also really appreciate Phil's taste in beer, because Metropolitan is an excellent brewery and they make fantastic German style beers. I feel so lucky that I was connected to them through Liz Garibay, who is the director and the founder of the Chicago Brewseum.
Awesome.
And I call her my beer fairy godmother sometimes, because without that connection, I'm not sure where things would be today. So I feel very lucky that those stars aligned.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the best brewery to be connected to.
I agree.
I mean, if Dovetail was, not Dovetail, if Double Clutch was open at the time, I'd say maybe those guys too, because they're great. Double Clutch out in Evanston.
And Dovetail does.
Well, I mean, Dovetail as well, yeah.
Dovetail's great, sure.
But I was
absolutely.
also thinking about Double Clutch because I love them so much. All right, so, Brandon, have you ever had this beer before?
I don't.
I know you've had the Bach. I know you had the Bach at the Meals on Wheels.
Yeah, what was the other one? If it was this,
It
I don't know.
been this one.
I don't
Oh, you
know.
did?
Yeah.
What are your impressions of it?
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's reminiscent of like it's a cleaner version of like the beers you grew up on, like like if you're drinking like an MGD or something like that. But it's
nail
like
on the head. That's exactly
cleaner. It doesn't feel like it's sitting as heavy like when I drink it, and it's so well balanced. Like it's a very well balanced beer.
I like the hoppiness in it, and it's not like a super strong hoppiness, but you really can pick up on a really nice bitterness that I feel like makes me want to go back to it, because it's a light, easy drinking beer. It does remind me of like days of yore, or even like modern day Pilsners, but it has like a classic taste to it. Like, I don't know, the bitterness is what sells me on this particular beer.
This is definitely
Wait till we get to the Bach.
This is a beer that definitely helps IPA drinkers drink lagers, because I feel like the hop content makes them feel comfortable, which is important. We want to make those IPA drinkers feel comfortable.
Yeah. Join us, hopheads.
But this one we decided to make Seipp's Extra Pale first. When I say we, I mean Doug Hurst, myself, Liz Garibay, and Tracy Hurst. Because we wanted to make one of Seipp's most popular beers, which Seipp's Extra Pale most certainly was. We also knew we were going to be releasing this beer in the summertime, and everybody loves a good Pilsner in the summertime.
Good thinking.
And it was also a real challenge. Doug's always up for a challenge. He's such a masterful brewer. He loved the idea of making a pre-Prohibition Pilsner because no one else was making them. And it was cool to see what people might have been drinking way before Prohibition.
Yeah.
I think the idea of a pre-Prohibition Pilsner is, we call it that so people have a way to place it in their own understanding of beer, but you can be sure that Conrad Seipp would have rolled over in his grave if he knew that Prohibition was going to be in his future. He just thought of it as an extra pale. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's I like that. I think that's why I liked it too, because of the idea of knowing that, the whole say, this is the beer that built Chicago, and knowing that it's such an old beer, and like that's what you guys came, like that made me more excited and interested in trying it. And so getting to taste that, it's like tasting history,
I love that. That's exactly how I feel about it. And I think what's nice about Seipp beer is that we want to connect with the past, but we want to enjoy the present. That's one of our mottos. And I think that one of the main questions I get is, is this the original recipe? And the answer is no, it's not. So
that was going to be my next question.
Gotcha, Brandon. Conrad did not hand down through history a beautifully antiqued piece of paper with German handwriting on it, which is a bummer. That would have been awesome.
Cool, yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of nice because it gives us the opportunity to think about what the beer would have been like, but also to make a beer that we want to drink now. Right. Because people only go to Williamsburg once, but hopefully they drink Seipp's beer a lot because they like it now. And it's not just sort of a throwback to the old days.
Sure.
And I think that we also made a beer that's very similar to how it would have been made, meaning we're using Lake Michigan water. That's the main ingredient. I think it's a lot cleaner now than it was then.
Which is wild.
Which is good. Yay. And then we're also using Saz and cluster hops.
I was going to ask what hops were being used.
Saz was actually, it said on the label, made with Bohemian hops. So we know on the historic label. So we know that was Saz. And then we know that cluster was the kind of hop that was really around in the Midwest during that time. So you can only imagine if you can't get the Saz hops from Bohemia, you would just grab some local cluster and throw those in. Yeah. And then we used 6-row barley and added flaked corn. And that was a really specific thing because when the Pilsner Revolution hit Europe, everyone in America was trying to make this famed, light, crisp, delicious, sparkling drink. And we couldn't make it happen because we didn't have the right barley. It was just way too proteiny, sort of globular. But we realized that we could make the Pilsners they were drinking in Europe by adding a little bit of flaked corn or, in some cases, rice. And so that was the origins of the American adjunct lager. And I think it's important to know that we didn't just started adding stuff to beer because we were trying to be cheap.
Check this out.
Probably
we could save money like this,
like some companies might do now. Yeah. But instead, it was trying to make good beer, and I really respect that. And I also think that you can taste it when you drink the extra pale. It just got this really great sort of round sweetness to it that I think that balance you were speaking of, Brandon, I think really comes through.
Yeah, and I think the corn and rice too, especially, and I know for the home brewing stuff, does wonders for the clarity of a beer too. Right. So, not only did you say you're using corn?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think corn adds a nice sweetness.
Yep.
Rice doesn't really do much except for.
I mean, it adds it's a cheap sugar carbohydrate to be added to the beer.
But I feel like there's never enough. You'd have to put a ton in there for there to be noticeable flavor change. It complements very well, I think. But corn, you can tell even I'm not saying small amounts, but when you're using it as it should be used in a beer, there's a specific sweetness to it.
Absolutely.
That I enjoy.
And I was going to ask you about which hops were used, and when you said cluster, that made sense of where the hoppiness is coming from, because the Saz hops, obviously, you get a nice... that is a very common German hop used in German lagers. And cluster, I think the first time I came across cluster, there was a Lagunitas specific beer that used cluster, and Lagunitas has, they have really hoppy beers. Yeah. So I just, put cluster in as a high alpha acid hop. So that's awesome to hear that's where that bitterness I feel like is coming from. This is a very good beer. I like it.
I agree. I drink a tremendous amount of this beer, and it's my firstborn. and so when people say, "Which is your favorite beer, Laurin?" I demurely say, "I love them all," but really,
that's parents who have multiple kids. I know my mom says she loves me and my sister equally.
But
I know the truth. I'm the youngest. It's okay.
Your sister wins.
You'd think that, but Okay, so the Chicago fire has happened.
Yes, back in time. Here we go. Grab
Brandon,
your beer.
Actually, real quick, is there still more in that can? I'd like to...
There is more in that can.
That one? That one?
That one, too.
That's the winner. I just want a little bit more. Okay, sorry. Anyways, going back in time.
So the Chicago fire, it sucks. Imagine what it'd be like if your friends and colleagues lost their livelihood Conrad kept making beer, kept growing his business until he became one of the biggest breweries in America in the 1870s, which is, a pretty big deal.
It's no small feat.
And his brewery stayed one of the biggest breweries really until Prohibition. Certainly in Chicago, and definitely a competitor on the national scene as well. He died in 1890, about a year and a half after he and his second wife, his first wife, died of pneumonia. Again, just sort of showing how hard life is in those days. People just died a lot. They had built a house in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, right up overlooking the lake. And he only had about 18 months to enjoy it, but it was a summer cottage that he built for his family. He had a big family. He had 3 surviving children from his first wife and then 5 surviving children from his second wife. So there were tons of people around. He just, like a good German, loved to entertain, and they built this house to get out of the city in the hot summer. And the nice thing is you all can still go visit it. It was given by my great uncle in 2007, I think, the house to the state of Wisconsin. And it had been pretty much exactly the same since when Conrad built it. We're not a family who changes much ever. And so it's just a really great way to connect with Conrad and that time in history. And you can take a boat ride to visit it. And take a tour, and just see what life was like in 1888.
There's a small chance that in 2 weeks I'm going to be up in Lake Geneva. So now I've got.
Now we've got something on your itinerary. Mm-hmm. It's called the Black Point Estate and Gardens.
All right, I'll remember that when I edit this episode.
Go back and watch there's a YouTube video I think both of us found when we were doing some searching, and it's some guy who does travel stuff for Wisconsin.
Oh, cool.
And he was in the house.
No way.
And didn't do a tour of the house, but it was like a 4-minute video, but he talks about how the Conrad had it built, and then it was in the family until I think he said 2005. Regardless, and then after
what was that guy now?
Given to the state. But he said, one of the things you can't do is take a visit to the brewery. But he had a book from the
World's Fair.
Yeah. Which they put out a printed book of all the stuff about the brewery. So he went through page by page, kind of talking about the process and what everything would look like, back then, which was kind of neat. But yeah, it's a 4-minute video. We can link it if people are interested. But yeah.
That is a great segue into what happened next with sort of the Seipp story, which is the 1893 World's Fair happened, and Seipp passed away. He died from pneumonia, complications, I think, from diabetes. And his son and family members took over. And there was also a big influx of capital from a British holding company that combined Seipp and a couple of malting companies and a few other breweries together. But Seipp was able to just keep running as sort of independent brewery. And so when the World's Fair rolled around, Seipp had been in operation for 40 years already. They were the brewery in Chicago, and so they sold beer at the World's Fair. And that little pamphlet you were talking about, I feel so dumb. I should have brought it tonight because I have a great copy of it, which I'll get to you guys. But it's just this wonderful promotional booklet of what the Seipp Brewery looked like, and then of what the beers that they were promoting. Extra Pale was described in this booklet, and so was the Columbia, which is, I think, a great beer that we can try next.
You know what? You should host your own podcast too, because that was a great. I was about to. I know Brandon's doing something as we're recording, but I was about to motion to him this is it, because I know that the Bach was a part of. Did you just shut everything down?
Yeah.
I just saw the light. I saw the reflection on your face of the light, and I'm like, so we're not recording anymore. Do you want to grab that, Brandon?
Yeah.
Do you have a story? Before we get into that, let's take a quick break. Let's take a quick... I don't know. Am I drinking barrel-aged beer? Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Talk more with Laurin and about Seipp's beer, and we're going to drink this Bach.
Sounds good.
We'll be Bach.
You had to do that.
And we're back.
You just can't get enough.
Welcome back, everybody. So now we've moved on to I'm sorry. What is the name of this beer?
This is Seipp's Columbia, which is known as the World's Fair Bach in certain circles. And I will tell you, this was a very fun beer to create because we had the pamphlet that I was just talking to you all about as our main source of direction. The extra pale, we had a lot to go on as far as what the beer was and what we needed, what it was going to be. I think it was probably pretty much exactly as it was 130 years ago. What we knew about the Columbia is we had a picture of the bottle from the 1893 World's Fair, which I can show you guys here. I have that pamphlet on my computer. And we had this great description of the beer, which is the following, and I will read it to you. The Columbia is likewise a beer made from pure malt and hops, thank goodness, a very dark in color and of unusual strength. For convalescents and persons whose bodily infirmities have rendered them physically weak, there is no better tonic and no better health restorer. You heard it here, folks.
This is it.
To the worker with brain and muscle, it is equally valuable, as it is an absolute repairer of the daily waste of him who sweats with his brow and frets with his brain.
That's exactly me. This is why I love this beer so much. That makes sense. They're right. Absolutely right.
You are restored.
I do feel really restored as I drink this. And by restored, I mean it's just delicious and I love it. I really do. And we've talked about, again, this is, Brandon, you had just mentioned, I was listening to an older episode on the way here about Insert Tony's lager recaps, about how I hated lagers for a long time.
What? Tony?
Yeah. It's not like that anymore.
Okay.
Box and dark lagers are what made me realize I do. Like, I really just got to find a way to not bring that up anymore. But it's true. Like, this specific style is exactly, and Matthew was talking with us as well when I brought that up. He agreed that, like, he enjoys dark lagers, and this is a really good beer. I like the sweetness to it. It's still refreshing. I mean, the ABV doesn't hurt either. But it's still it still drinks as a refreshing beer. Like, I could have, I know they're in 16-ounce cans, but I could easily have two of these, like, in a sitting. I wouldn't, like, slam them right away,
No, you'd enjoy them.
The extra pale, but this I could sit here, unlike other, like, dark beers. You know, if you have a stout, sometimes you're just like, okay, that's enough.
Right.
I don't know if I want to have more, unless you're going to a specific beer fest. But something like this is as much as I know that the pale is your baby.
We can all have our favorites.
This is my favorite. This is I haven't had the Hefeweizen, but this is by far my favorite beer that you guys have done, and it's so delicious.
I'm so glad, and I totally agree with you. I think my husband has given up eating dinner so that he can just have 2 of these a night, because like you, he just thinks they're so delicious.
I don't know if my wife would be okay with that, but he's not wrong.
Drink your dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still going to do work in the garden.
Liquid. There's vitamin B in here. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I think what makes this beer so delightful is the finish. It is just really easy to drink, and I think a lot of people equate dark lagers with something that is really syrupy and sweet, and that's just not the case, and certainly not the case with this one.
Not at all. There's a nice sweetness up front, slight bitterness in the back, but still and it's not bitter. It's definitely not bitter like the pale. It's just enough to kind of start with a little sweetness. Then there's this, I'm gonna channel Dan here, aqueousness that kind of rolls through my tongue, but also a nice light medium body, and then there's that slight bitterness, and then it's done. And it almost is it's drying at the end, where you want to go back in for another sip.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
It's not, there might be a slight roastiness to it, but not roasty in the sense of a stout or something that's really focusing on a roasted malt. It's just, I don't know what you guys use in it.
A little bit of roasted malt.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Nice job.
Dark in there. But yeah, even aroma-wise, it doesn't come off like a dark, roasty beer. And it's caramel brown color. It looks like a brown ale. And I love brown ales. But this is my favorite beer so far from Seipps. Hands down.
We'll keep them coming. We'll get you your own supply of
I'm ruined.
Columbia. So it was a not only were we thinking about Tony when we made this beer, but
Obviously.
we were also just really wanting, it was important to me, if we started off with the extra pale, wanted to make something that was very different from that. And I think this very much is, but also sort of is in the same general family. When you drink the extra pale, it's not crazy to think that you might also be about to drink the Columbia.
Yeah, the contrast between the two is very there.
Yes.
You have one to go to the other, which when we were talking to you at the Meals on Wheels Chicago on Tap, these are the two that you had with you, right? So that was very nice contrasting of whether you had one first and the other second, it didn't really matter, because you really do get a chance to try and taste the beer specifically.
Yeah.
It's not like you're being beaten down with some hops or a sweetness or sourness or whatever. No offense to anybody else who did those things. It's okay. It's totally fine. We're just talking about Seipps right now. Looking at you, Matthew. Just joking.
So this beer is one that we started off, you all may have noticed just from pictures and so forth, but we started off like that picture we have on the computer right now. We started off in 2020 brewing and packaging in bottles because it just made the most sense, I think. It's a historic beer. They didn't start canning anything, I think, until 1934. However, we quickly realized that cans, I like drinking out of bottles better, but generally speaking, cans are better for beer, and you need to do what's best for the beer because you can always pour it in a glass. And Conrad Seipp was just the sort of person, he was always pushing the envelope, always doing the next best thing, always an innovator in his field. And if Seipp had been alive when there were cans, he absolutely would have put his beer in cans if that was the best thing for the beer. So, for example, he had a patent for the refrigerated boxcar because he was one of the first brewers to ship beer outside of Chicago. Chicago was drinking so much beer that brewers didn't have to ship outside of Chicago. We were drinking all our beer and then all of Wisconsin's beer, all of Milwaukee's beer. But Seipp recognized that he could sell more beer if he sold out west. And there's a quote, I think, from the Tribune of someone saying that Seipp beer did more for the Western temperance movement than any sort of church group, because people were drinking beer, Seipp's beer, instead of whiskey, which I think we can all agree is a better choice, especially when you're working hard.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have a lot of... Whiskey's not really refreshing. Tastes great.
And you shouldn't drink too much of it.
Absolutely not.
So I think...
You guys want some whiskey?
I think that is I think that's an important thing to remember about Seipp, is that not only he was lucky, he made his way to a city that was rapidly expanding. He found his way into a career that had a lot of growth potential. Again, the Chicago fire, although very unlucky for Chicago and for his colleagues, was actually, from a business point of view, pretty lucky for him. But he was also just very good at business.
I was going to say, like, even from the way it sounds, even if the Chicago fire didn't happen, I think we would still be having the same type of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really respect about him is that he wanted to sell beer, and that's what this is all about. It's about making good beer, but it's also about selling good beer. And he was one of the first people to really market and use merchandising. There's some great trays with pictures of people drinking beer and some great mugs.
I do have an old school Schlitz tray at home.
They're so cool, aren't they?
I mean, I think we got to think about getting a Seipp's tray going at some point.
Absolutely.
Like,
well,
people would get those, just throw it out there.
I think we need to look into a round 2 Seipp's tray. We'll put Tony and Branton can be the Seipp's girls.
That would totally sell. As I shake my head now.
So I don't know if I told y'all this story before, but there's this great story. All the brewers were friends, and Seipp was one of the older
Which,
generation.
by the way, is a lot like... Sorry,
like it is now.
It is now. Like, that's one of the things that we've expressed and talked about so much here on the podcast, that, especially in Chicago and surrounding suburbs, that it really is like a close family of everybody knows everybody helps each other, and everybody's friends, which is very nice. It's healthy competition, and everybody knows that everybody's drinking each other's beers.
Totally. It's such a wonderful industry to be in that regard.
I mean, if you're really interested in getting a Seipp's beer tray, $450 on eBay right now.
That's a lot of money.
That one right there.
Ooh, that's in good shape.
What? That's cool. We could redo that.
We could have a bake sale. We could sell some beer and
I think Brandon and I could pose as that picture.
It's a great idea.
The two ladies in the...
Those ladies are a lot nicer looking.
This is kind of neat, though. So I just did a quick eBay search of Seipp's, and there's a ton of Seipp stuff. There's, vintage beer bottles that people are selling.
Oh, cool.
There's a ton. And I get it.
That's awesome.
One of the great things about restarting the brewing company is that so many wonderful people reach out with their own stories about ancestors who have these really cool stories in and of themselves, but also people will send me. I got this great message from a guy who said he was a construction worker, and in the 80s he was working on L stop up in the north part of Chicago and found this bottle, and he was like, oh cool, a nice old bottle, it's in good shape, it must just be from some brewery. Put it in the back of his closet. There was no internet at that point, so we didn't even know how to look it up. And then he looked it up once the internet came around, and it happened to be once I had restarted the company, and he emailed me and said, hey, I just realized that this is your bottle.
That's awesome.
And I think you should have it.
Whoa.
And I was so thankful, and I said, well, what can I pay you for it? And he said, it's your bottle, I'll just send it to you. So he sent it to me, and I sent him a t-shirt back to thank him. But that was just such an example of the kindness there is in the world, and also the specialness. I'm just crazy about bottles. Like, who filled them? Who drank the beer?
Yeah.
How did that bottle survive this whole time?
The best gift would have been if you would have filled that bottle with beer and sent it back.
Sent it back, yeah, that's true.
And then send me the
I
empty
should still
when you're
do
done.
that.
That's a lot of work just for a bottle.
But it's a fun story.
Good idea.
True.
Missed opportunity. So essentially, I just I respect Conrad for lots of different reasons. I think he was a very good person. He was very philanthropic, and he was very good at business. And I said very hardworking, which I think is the most important thing. It's hard work that really matters.
Shows with everything that we've been discussing and what we have in front of us now in history. Like that's amazing. It's a great immigration story.
I think he was also a little bit silly because I love this story. So you all know Frederick Pabst.
Mm-hmm.
He had a beer company called
Pabst.
And he got Conrad.
Schlitz. It was called Schlitz.
Conrad.
Sorry. That was great. Okay, sorry.
So Pabst had this beer company, and he and Conrad were friends. Conrad was a bit older. Pabst ended up being one of Seipp's honorary pallbearers in Seipp's funeral. And
That's awesome.
Pabst, I'm sure y'all know, he wasn't a brewer. He basically stepped he married a woman who was from a brewing family, and he took over the brewery, and the brewery was originally called Best. So in order to make that transition work well in Milwaukee, they came up with the slogan, "He who drinks Pabst drinks best," to help connect that legacy.
Smart.
So in Chicago, his buddy was just like, "Oh yeah? Seipp's is just a little better than the kind you thought was best." And that's their slogan. That was his slogan.
That's so good.
That he has on a beer mug. And I have several of those beer mugs. And I love that
those are
slogan. It's so
cool. That's
Victorian.
That's awesome, actually.
That's really great.
I know. I can see you guys lobbing those at each other across
Absolutely.
the border.
We would. We totally would. Did you also bring the Hefeweizen by any chance?
I sure did.
The only reason why I wanted to get to that, I know we've already been drinking 2 other beers. Brandon and I had a beer also before you got here. It's a Monday night.
It's your
I want to get to
basement.
that because, to me, Brandon is the Hefeweizen aficionado of the podcast. I say that only because I don't mean that like this guy fucking knows Hefeweizen. You really like Hefeweizen.
Yeah.
I feel like
I enjoy a good Hefeweizen.
when we're at a brewery or something, you are more apt to go for a Hefeweizen before I am, so to speak. So I thought maybe this would be a good time because this is one that I've not tried. So it's more of the other 2 I've had before having you on. So I've had these 2. So now it's like, this is like a brand new beer. And also you brought these really cool, like perfect beer glasses for
I
it.
did. These are absolutely made in honor of Doug Hurst because
So cool.
he told me when I was talking with him about what kind of glassware I should do. He was just like, it needs to be bulbous.
Yeah.
And it needs to really be able to show off the beer. And so I got the most
Smell
bulbous
it opens up. It's perfect.
glass I could.
We got to use them. We got to use these. Well, us. I know you got the taste
I know,
there.
I don't even know.
I mean, unless you want to go in with us as well. It's up to you.
I don't want to take a beer away from Brandon.
And I'm making sure Brandon keeps these, and I'm going to take the box back with me, hopefully,
And
without him knowing.
I don't. I've been finding Hefeweizen is a funny beer in that it's like the Red Sox or the Yankees. You're either a fan of one or the other.
He's opening 2. We're okay. He's opening 2. Oh, jeez.
And I feel like it's like cilantro. There's some people who
Yes.
absolutely love Hefeweizens.
Great.
And other people who don't.
Yeah. I feel kind of
Thank you.
I have a love-hate relationship with certain wheat beers, and Hefeweizen is one of them. Like, Hocker Shore, to me, was like the first wheat Hefeweizen beer that I ever had that I absolutely loved. And the first time I had it, my friend and I was probably like 21, 22, drank 2 of them, and I was not in a good place. And it's just because I hadn't had something like that before. Since then, Brandon and I have tried to brew a beer that we call 2 Weissmen. It's a Hefeweizen. And Brandon has perfected it, as he has for other beers that we've done in his system.
That's a great
Brandon's
name.
a very good home brewer, by the way, which we had something to share, but we don't. But I'm
Next
very
time.
excited.
Found a bottle of the pedestrian, probably flat.
Not going to have that. Okay. So before we get into the story of this one, I want to know, Brandon, what your take is on this. I saw you go in there, smell, taste.
So the first, like, it's always the smell for me, and I'm getting like that banana ester, like a slight bit of clove, and then like just sweet maltiness, and that's kind of like what I look for, and that's what I enjoy. There's Hefeweizens that don't have that at all, and I'm just not enjoyable. But like this is like right up the alley of like perfection, and I say that because like when
Not because you're a guest, because we will easily just be like,
Yeah.
it's good. and just have left it.
I'm
at
going to
that.
take right up the alley of perfection.
100%.
It's a very big compliment.
Like seriously, like
Yay.
there have been beers that we've had before. We're like, it's pretty good. I don't necessarily like it for myself. Not this beer. I'm not talking about. I haven't reviewed this yet. But there have been beers and people on here where we've discussed. So no blowing smoke up anybody's bum here.
I don't know why I just thought of this, but there was this article, this video that I saw. They're talking about the celebrity chef Guy Fieri when he does his show Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. If he doesn't like food, he just describes the actual ingredients. It's like, oh, it's good green pepper in here, and you got
the green pepper,
some chicken,
got the chicken, got the cheese. Good job, man.
Yeah. So if he describes it, he doesn't really like it.
That's not us.
That's a good clue.
Yeah, but what my point was too is, like, now I have this memory of, like, for my honeymoon, my wife and I, our last stop, we did a kind of a Euro trip, and our last stop was Munich. And I drank some really good Hefeweizens there. And if it reminds me of that, then I'm like, this is a good Hefeweizen. And I'm getting reminders of what it was like in Germany. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exactly what we were going for.
Is there more left in the can? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
I've already started drinking. Is this one here? Okay. Yeah. I can't believe how. Okay.
Tony's going back for more, everybody.
So
this is a good sign.
Again, we already prefaced, like, if we don't really like something, like, we are kind of like, hey, yeah, that's maybe not for me, but I understand what you're doing here and everything. There are some Hefeweizens where I don't know what it is. It's maybe like too much clove that I get hit with, or too much of the banana, or maybe just however it's fermented. That's just too much for me. Oh, Aggie's here. That's great. This is aroma-wise, I get clove, maybe a little bit of banana, but I also get like that bubble gum that you get from certain Hefeweizens. And
That's what I was going to say.
yeah, it's light. It doesn't feel like a heavy wheat beer. This is probably like one of my favorite like Hefeweizen beers, and it's not because we've been drinking other beers. Two beers. We're splitting all these other beers. It's not wasted Tony talking. This is really good. Like when I saw that the other beer that you guys were doing was Hefeweizen, I was like, I'll be honest, because I'm not. I used to really love Hefeweizen beers. I'm not a huge fan of them. As you guys saw, I drank. I've already poured it back to where it was. I didn't drink it all the way through, but I got pretty damn close, and I wanted more because I wanted to make sure that this is what I was tasting, and it's really good. And it does marry kind of, to me, it marries clove, banana, and bubblegum that I like in a Hefeweizen, and it's light, and it's refreshing, and it's very good. Very, very good.
I've never thought about this before, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I feel like, in a way, we're making these gateway beers, not on purpose, but we have the extra pale, which really helps the IPA drinker get closer to lagers. And then we have the Columbia, which is a beer that shows people that dark lagers can be very drinkable. And then we have the Hefeweizen, which shows people, or the Bavarian, that shows people that Hefeweizens, who, aren't necessarily drawn to Hefeweizens,
That's me.
can be, just a really delicious thing and different than what they were thinking. And so I think that's what good beer is all about. It's about teaching you something new and opening up new worlds. How about that for philosophy?
It's fantastic.
One of my favorite.
I'm gonna get it tattooed.
One of my favorite Hefeweizens is Julius Hector, and these two were on tap together, or I had a choice. I'd go with this just because it's local, and it is nowhere near not as good as that. Like, there's no reason why I wouldn't enjoy this as much as I would that. So
yeah, this is wild for me. What? So how did this one come to be?
So this one came to be because we're making all of Seipp's historic beers, or we're recreating all of the brands. And this brand, Seipp's Bavarian, we didn't know what kind of a beer it was 100 years ago. But we do know that a beer called the Bavarian was most likely helping immigrants in America who are from Bavaria and feel like they were at home. And what better beer than a Hefeweizen to make people from Bavaria feel like they weren't that far away from home. And I think that was something special I'm starting to realize about Seipp is instead of just having one beer, he had all these different beers, and they were beers that helped, I think they were really focused on helping immigrants just have a place in Chicago. He had the Bohemian, he had the Hollander, he had all these beers that I think were a nice way to make people feel at home. And I would love it if that is what we can do for whoever's drinking the beer now in 2023 is just help them feel at home wherever they are. So another thing that really contributed to this being a Hefeweizen is Doug Hurst wanted, as any master craftsman wants, he wanted to be challenged. And making a Hefeweizen is hard. I think it's similar to making a Helles in that regard. It's just you have to get it just right, or else you get it
Fermentation
wrong.
temperatures, everything. Like we went through a couple of different iterations of our own, so
It's really hard, and you have to recognize that all the really good beers are coming over from Germany, and they're not fresh. So he really wanted to make an excellent, we call it a traditional Hefeweizen, because that's exactly what we wanted it to be. And so you saying that this reminds you of the beer that you had in Munich is a massive compliment, because that's exactly what we were going for.
No, and it really does, and I'm not just saying that. And the reason what I go for that too is we spent I don't remember how long we were in Munich.
it's because you were drinking all the good beers.
Well, and I think I've probably told this story on the podcast before, but the day we got to Munich, we were looking up places that we could walk to, and I was like, why don't we go to the place where they hold, Oktoberfest? That would be fun to walk over there. And I was on Google Maps, and it's the first time Google Maps ever showed me that there was an event happening. And I clicked on it, I'm like, what is this? And in that park, it said Fräulingfest. And my wife speaks a little German. She goes, I think that's Springfest. I was like,
Yes.
is it their Mayfest? And we're like, I think it is. We got there, and it was full blown. Like, the first thing we did when we got there was we got on a carousel that was just a bar. We spun around, got beers. Ended up in a beer tent where we were sitting with like these 16-year-old kids, like that were slamming beers. Like
you were texting me while this was going on.
Yeah, well, because then the one kid was there. He was all like, "Oh, you love Donald Trump, right? Yeah, he's gonna be."
It's a good German
I'm like,
What kind of accent is that, Brandon?
Sorry, that's a random accent.
"Hello, you like?"
Hello.
That's more like
Now-
Yugoslavian or
Now Brandon is Eastern European.
butchering my German ancestry, regardless of the fact. But
And
yeah,
mine.
so this kid was sitting there like talking up Trump and whatever. But
Yeah.
it was just hilarious because like they were just hammered kids. But we had there, and then we visited a couple breweries and had just really good like beers in general, but Hefeweizen. But the point of that story was they felt super clean, and this one feels super clean.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it doesn't feel heavy, and like
This is like one of the first, if only like Hefeweizen that I had. Like I said, it's maybe I didn't say this, but it's a medium light body where it doesn't feel heavy. Like I really like that about this, but I still can't get over like the nice blending of like clove, banana, and bubblegum.
yeah.
That was so hard for you and I to do. Like we were leaning more towards getting that like bubblegum type flavor originally, and there's only been a few that I've had, and this like nails it. So that's 3 for 3 for me. I gotta be honest.
Phew, what a relief.
Yeah, I mean, because if it wasn't, you'd be in big trouble.
I know.
I would tell everybody, don't buy their beer. It's horrible. What's next? What's next now that you've knocked out 3, right? That's 3. There's only 3 you guys have so far?
So far, yep.
I say you guys because of the collective, so
It is.
that's all right.
It's
There's
collective.
you guys.
I'll take whatever you got.
So there's 3 beers which are phenomenal, and if anybody is it only available in Chicago area right now?
It's available in Chicagoland, which, as you all know, is quite a large swath
big.
of area. And then it's also available in southeastern Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I think Wisconsin's a great state, and I'd like for them to have even more beer than they already have.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll keep expanding in that direction, as well as Illinois.
So do you have anything lined up next?
Well,
You got 3.
Tony, funny you should ask.
I'm ready.
Yes.
I want to know because it's 3 for 3 for me. And I'll let you know what my rating is, by the way, when we're done, of the 3, where I rank them.
Okay.
Just gonna throw it out there.
This is exciting. Something to look
Really
forward
putting myself
to.
on the spot there.
Tony is upping his own ante here. We are working on the next beer right now. And it's pretty exciting because I actually have an unopened bottle of it.
Ooh, this is like an exclusive.
It is. It is very exclusive. And this unopened bottle has a fragment of the label on it. So I know what the beer was. This was one of Seipp's most popular beers in the 1900s.
Interesting.
So it was, he wouldn't have tasted it. It was after he died. And I am working with a few different folks to figure out the best way to analyze this bottle of beer. And you guys have probably already heard a bunch of the stories of how people have done this in the past.
Drink it.
Old beers, yeah.
You definitely
You'd be
do
like,
not drink it.
Tastes like garbage. This is probably a porter.
You chug it and see what happens.
That is the scientific approach for sure. But there are
It's
other
delicious.
ways that are less poisonous. I will tell you, I get a little nervous about what the substance is in this unopened bottle of beer because it's very possible. I just can't help but think that it's construction worker pee that someone just capped again.
And they capped it.
They capped it, but it's very well capped. I think that would be
It's pretty hard.
That'd be hard to cap it.
Now
that
you could
well.
probably get away with it, but back
Back
then, I
then.
feel
Not
like
everybody
it's
had a
pretty
capper.
Tough, yeah.
Yeah,
Some
exactly.
Brand and I
construction-
both have cappers, and we've totally no. Just,
So
That's
I'm-
terrible.
You're making me
Great
feel
prank.
better. You're making me feel better.
yeah, I think
But
you're okay.
I am. I mean, it's a long time for yeast to survive. We'll see what is in this
Unless it
sludge
was in the
bottle.
bottom of Lake Michigan when it was found.
So
If that would have been great if it had.
So there's a bottle that has beer in it. You don't know what it is.
Something in it.
Something in
We
it.
haven't declared that it's beer yet.
I think it's beer.
I
think
know
that's
the
probably
brand.
better.
We're pretty sure. We're hoping it's beer.
I'm going to lean towards beer. Do you have any speculation at all of what type of beer it might be? Like
Yes, that is what I'm working on based off of the name and my sleuthing for sort of what Conrad was doing and what was happening at the time in Europe.
Is there any way you can tell us what it was?
Yeah, because you guys are
Okay,
really
cool,
nice,
cool.
and
Thank you
also
so much.
because I think that this is
Because even
something-
if it doesn't end up, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Even if it doesn't end up being exactly what you thought it was, it's still gonna. I'm gonna be honest, probably gonna be an awesome beer regardless.
It's going to be an awesome beer regardless, and it's also, it already exists. I mean, that's the fun thing about this. It's not a secret because we all know what
Sure.
the Seip's brands were, so it's just a question of in what order are we re-releasing
Yeah.
them. So Seipp made a beer called the Hollander.
Okay.
I also think this is important because it's a fun path to go on, so why not, a fun journey to go on, so why not bring everyone along with it as we go?
Yeah.
So he made this beer called the Hollander, and it had this big old yellow shoe on it. It is 100% like hitting all of the stereotypes of Holland.
Say that 10 times fast.
And I think that it's interesting to think about if Seipp is making beers that are appealing to immigrants at the time. There were a lot of Dutch immigrants to Chicago, including Inglewood, including New Holland, and then also Rosemont was another enclave. And I also am recognizing that Heineken and Amstel were getting going probably about 20 years before, and they were not importing to America yet. So if you think about people who are thinking about how to sell more beer, why not have an immigrant group that you're going to sell beer that they are used to and give it the old American twist and put some windmills
that.
on the label and call it a day.
So it's gonna, from what you're telling us, it's another type of maybe light lager, not light lager, but like a straight up lager.
Well, that's what we need. It's certainly going to be a lager.
Lager, okay. Which I think is fun
that's
because
what he was making.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you already have the extra pale lager, you've got the Bock, you have the delicious Hefeweizen,
Right.
and now having kind of like the Gusto type Holland lager, I think is that makes the most sense for the next step. Even if it might not be that, what's in there, but the idea, I think you're right because of, like you said, targeting immigrants who are coming in to make it feel at home. That type of label kind of says what it is.
Totally.
Even if you guys can't figure out what is in the bottle, I think you will. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So you heard it here first.
There it is, man.
Now
so
we
that's
just
like,
have to make it all happen.
that.
World exclusive.
Oh, you're doing that? Okay, I was doing a terrible hip hop horn. Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that also helps round out, the beers that you have, that you all have to kind of make it something that's appealing for everybody. Because I would say the extra pale is definitely a lighter, like you said, hoppy, or like we've all said hoppy, like a way to bring in some of the IPA drinkers. That's a lighter version of a lager. That's it's a pilsner to drink, and it's an easy drinking beer. The Bock, also light, refreshing, but also has a little bit more
got some
body
heft,
to it.
yep.
So yeah, I mean that's something that's like
It's a restorer of health, if you will.
But
Exactly.
I feel like that can't this Holland style beer can't be the end. There's
No.
obviously I'm just trying to think, like you were saying, that this will round it out, but I'm like, there's got to be more.
Oh, there's definitely going to be more. Don't you worry.
Done, Brandon. I swear to God.
4 is a nice even number, though.
That's
It'll
what
be
I was
good
going
in a
with.
4-pack,
I was going
right?
like when you have the first four. Like the first 4 beer, I'm gonna rant right now, Brandon. You brought out the rant for me.
Awful lot
Here
of
comes a
words.
rant.
Not going anywhere.
Here it is, the 60-second rant. Brandon's always telling me what to do. No, I'm just thinking as far as when you have one beer, that's a good thing. 2 beers, awesome. 3 beers, fantastic. But when you got 4, that's like when you've had a trilogy of movies, and then the 4th one comes out, and the 4th one's like this is gonna show no pressure. This is gonna show hey, here it is 4 different styles of beer. I mean that.
Are you talking Scream movies or
all the Scream movies are great.
Halloween?
They're not all great.
Can we talk about maybe legs on a chair, Tony? I feel like that.
There we go.
That
Legs
might
on
feel a
chair.
little bit more relatable.
This is the 4th leg of the chair.
There we go. Or
Man,
a table.
What a great way. Yeah, we're not doing trilogies. The 4th leg is the second one's always the best. The Bach. So yeah,
I've sat on some really good 3-legged chairs.
It's the 4th. Tricycles are fantastic. It's the 4th leg of the chair. I just feel like 4 being an even number, that is, it's a nice variety. If you sat down at a bar and they just had Seipp's beer, okay, this bar just we just serve Seipp's. What do you got? Well, there's 4 different styles on tap.
It just
3 is
feels
great.
even.
2 is good. 1 is this is what I'm stuck with.
4 is even's better.
But even stuck with number 1, you're fine. 2 is great. 3 is good. I'm sorry. 2 is great. 3 is good. 4 is awesome.
So many numbers.
So many adjectives, too.
I think the long and short of it is Tony likes the idea of 4 beers, which is good. That's what we're going to have coming up here.
I like the chair.
Let's open a Tide House.
That's a great idea.
All right, before we move on or wrap this up, I want to give, and Brandon, I'm putting you on the spot as well. We're going to rate the 3. We're not rating him out of things. We're just going to put him in order.
Cares.
But it's just out of curiosity. I want to know where you, if you had to put him in what order you're going to drink him.
If you only had 3 beers instead of 4 to rate.
And you had...
This place is the worst.
This bar is awful.
Come back when you
I
have 4
just want to
beers,
know where
Laurin.
you put the 3 beers. What you're going for first. Because you're going to
In my stomach.
I know, you're drinking all 3, but where are you putting the 3?
In a glass?
Jesus, man.
Play along, Brandon. Play along.
Trying to make it as bad for you. Surprisingly not. I'm going to do the Pale Ale first.
Oh, the Pale Pilsner.
The Pale Pilsner first. The Hefeweizen, and then the Bock.
Okay. I'm going Bach, Hefeweizen, Extra Pale.
All right.
There we
Good.
go.
You guys are good friends.
See?
So clearly
That's
you
it.
balance each
We're
other
still going to
out.
drink them together regardless. So.
In a big old mix. I want to just make a quick note about the labels because I think that is a thing to note. We really wanted to stay pretty close to history, making these labels, recognizing that we had to change some stuff because 19th century cursive is pretty hard to read. It looked like leaps instead of Seipp's. But it has been a real pleasure. We've worked with Stout basically Stout Collective to recreate what the old labels would have looked like, but with a modern twist.
It does look like it says.
It does look like it says leaps.
And I think our main logo, which has got the scales of justice, At least that's what I like to call them. That is pretty much exactly how it was. It's just cleaned up a little bit. And then the other, the actual beer labels supporting that all play pretty close homage to the original labels. And that's what I think is fun about the Hollander, is that it's a crazy label. It's got a picture of this Dutch woman on it. It's got this massive yellow shoe and a windmill in the background and Delft tile. It's like throwing it all in there. And I think that'll be a real challenge to figure out how to make that so it's not
How more obvious
confusing.
can we be?
Everything to make you think Dutch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What is the
Salvatore. Yeah.
The Salvador was one of Seipp's most really popular beers, and I'm frustrated because Salvador, the copyright is locked up by, and I'm sorry, I've had too many very small glasses of beer here.
This is the perfect podcast.
I want to say Polliner,
okay.
a German brewery that will not let other people use the name Salvatore, even though I think of it as a type of a beer, not a brand of a beer. So if you guys can think, maybe I can call it like.
We know some people.
We can change some copyright law, but I think that I would love to make that beer because it was the Salvador export.
Where's our attorney?
We need some attorneys.
Dan, who's also on the show, is an attorney.
We can spell it with two
He's
S's.
environmental, but we make him do things
Whatever,
he's not
same
supposed to
thing.
do.
By the way, Dan wanted me to retract some things because I had said some shit on an episode, but that was wrong about like last time we saw Clark, and I didn't go to the farmer's market before my fantasy football draft. There it is. It's retracted.
What'd you do?
Knocked into glasses. Do you know what style of beer?
I think Salvatore. I mean, if the beer was named a Salvatore, it had to have been a Salvador, and so it probably was a Doppelbock. But it's a little bit confusing because it was also an export, which means that it was probably hoppier than your average Doppelbock. It was also lighter in color than the Columbia. I mean, there's just all sorts of so much stuff that needs to be unwound throughout beer history, and it's really exciting, and it's also very confusing. There was a time around Prohibition when Seipp just went crazy and just put like all of his logos on beers. It was like the Hollander Export Extra Pale all on one label, and you were just like, what are you dudes doing? And it didn't make any sense, but I guess that was a hard time for everybody.
Buy all the beers.
Buy all the beers. And then we found eBay's a great place for history digging around because we found and purchased a bottle that still had its label on, and it was Seipp's ginger ale.
What?
So during Prohibition,
Prohibition.
they were making ginger ale for a time.
I like that if you Google Salvador and beer, it's like, what do people drink in El Salvador? I'm like, great. That's not what I was looking for.
We need a T, not the D.
Unless we're going off maybe there was a huge migration of El Salvadorians.
Very possible.
coming in, and Conrad was like, yo, what beers do you guys like? I'm going to make it just for you.
I'm pretty sure he started the sentence off with "yo," being from Germany.
Salvatore would be a wonderful
You don't know
one.
how they talked in the 1800s?
Just like that.
In the 1800s.
Just like that.
Hi-yo. I don't know.
Yo.
Without funny Eastern European
cheerio.
accent that you just gave us.
Actually, yeah, I want more of the German accent you had earlier.
You should do a whole podcast of just Brandon in the German accent.
Oh, that was fantastic. No, don't. Okay, that's enough. Laurin, it has been fantastic having you join us.
Super fun.
today. Thank
Oh,
you
the
so
pleasure
much.
is all mine. Thank
much
you all
fun.
so
I'm
much
glad
for having me.
We got to do this. It was awesome to learn the history and to sample through the 3 beers that are readily available now.
Yes.
In the Chicagoland area and making its way to, did you say northeast Wisconsin?
All parts of Wisconsin, but definitely
Oh.
starting in southeastern.
Southeastern
parts.
parts. And you know, we a lot of listeners here from, although a lot of listeners are from all over the place, but there are a lot of listeners in the Chicagoland area. So you guys, you'll see the logo in the episode picture, and we'll post a link and everything. The beers are fantastic. I really am like super excited that this Hefeweizen was.
We have a convert.
I was so worried I'm gonna be like, I'm just gonna think it's okay. I love it. I really, really do. It's
love that.
fantastic. Very good beers, and awesome to hear the history and the story about where it all started and the beer that built Chicago.
You got it. Thanks again for having me. What a fun night.
We'll have to have you back some other time when we get the next 3 beers. Okay, so we'll do 3 at a time. Tricycle beers.
If you ever just want us to come sample new stuff,
That would be even better.
We're also trying to do that too. We just want to get in and try free beer.
try it before it's popular.
We will. But thank you again very much. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brandon, love you, buddy.
Love you too, man.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
This has been The Malting Hour. Be sure to follow us on all social media by searching The Malting Hour and at themaltinghour.com. You can also follow us individually on social media. Brandon can be found on Instagram as BMDub81, on Twitter, BDub81, and on Untapped as BDubDrinksBeer. Tony can be found on Instagram and Untapped under Ace of Help Chicago, on Twitter, The Ace of Help Chicago. Clark can be found as Clarkowski on all 3. Dan can be found on Instagram as hip__hops and hip hops on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, like, and rate the show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Until next time, cheers from all of us at The Malting Hour.